I'm Tracy Sabol. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, calling for peace. President Trump holds a phone conversation with Vladimir Putin as the U.S. seeks to end the war in Ukraine. What they discussed: chaos in the Middle East. Hundreds are dead following Israeli airstrikes in the Gaza Strip. What it means for peace in the region. Seeking answers. President Trump responds to the recent vandalism of a Catholic church in Wichita, Kansas. And preparations underway. New details from the Vatican on how the Synod on Synodality will be implemented across the church. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the Feast of St. Cyril of Jerusalem. Our top story tonight: President Donald Trump announces on Truth Social an immediate ceasefire on all energy and infrastructure in the war in Ukraine. This comes after he spoke by phone today with Russian President Vladimir Putin. A conversation Trump says was a very good and productive one. And we have comprehensive team coverage tonight. Eric Rosales brings us reaction from Capitol Hill in just a moment. But first, we begin with White House correspondent Owen Jensen. Owen.
Tracy, the lengthy phone call between President Trump and President Putin took place this morning. President Trump said in addition to the partial ceasefire, they're working quickly to have a complete ceasefire and ultimately an end to the war.
After the call between President Trump and President Putin, the White House releases a statement, writing in part, "Today, President Trump and President Putin spoke about the need for peace and a ceasefire in the Ukraine war," and later adding this key paragraph. The leaders agreed that the movement to peace will begin with an energy and infrastructure ceasefire, as well as technical negotiations on implementation of a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea, full ceasefire, and permanent peace. These negotiations will begin immediately in the Middle East. The U.S. administration looking to persuade Russia to sign off on a ceasefire. Today's call comes after Ukrainian officials last week agreed to the American ceasefire proposal during talks in Saudi Arabia led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky today visiting a military cemetery to pay his respects to Ukrainian soldiers killed during Russia's invasion of the country remains skeptical that Putin is ready for peace as Russian forces continue to pound Ukraine. And according to the Kremlin, Putin also called on Trump to end foreign military and intelligence assistance to Ukraine.
Now tonight, it's not immediately clear whether Ukraine is on board with this new ceasefire plan. Trump and Putin also talked about the need to improve bilateral relations between the U.S. and Russia. They also discussed the Middle East, the readout stating, quote, "The two leaders shared the view that Iran should never be in a position to destroy Israel." At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
All right, thank you, Owen. U.S. lawmakers are watching closely the developments between the U.S. and Russia. Since Russia's invasion 3 years ago, Congress has passed nearly $183 billion in aid for Ukraine, and many want that funding to stop. All agree that this is a pivotal moment. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales continues our team coverage. Eric.
Yes, good evening, Tracy. Let's face it, the stakes are high over the temporary ceasefire deal. Lawmakers are skeptical, though, that Russian President Vladimir Putin will keep his side of the bargain. Republican Senator Josh Hawley tells me a negotiated settlement was inevitable almost from the start.
Joe Biden had been saying privately to senators for literally years, 2 years. Anthony Blinken had been telling us behind closed doors that there would have to be a negotiated settlement, that a battlefield victory would never happen.
Others agree, especially since the U.S. has invested heavily in Ukraine.
There's been spring offensive, there's been tanks, there's been additional weaponry, there's been advanced weaponry. That line has not moved. If this was just set to continue, we would see a war of attrition and perhaps ultimately Russia marching across Ukraine.
Lawmakers add the ball was in Putin's court, and they're thankful he accepted the ceasefire deal.
They made a 30-day ceasefire deal with Ukraine. Ukraine accepted that, showing Ukraine was ready for peace and secessions. If Russia doesn't accept it just for 30 days, then they have ulterior motives. And that's what we're seeing from Russia.
But they add Putin cannot be trusted and will not keep his word if it serves in his best interests. Lawmakers insist the ceasefire must have guarantees.
He's now looking for a way out, as long as it is an enforceable peace, then I think we might be able to move forward. I question whether or not Mr. Putin is still serious about it, but whatever agreements we make, they have to be enforceable.
If we want to appease Putin and say, look, Putin, just do whatever you want, then that's going to be the reality. And Zelensky will be forced by Trump and Vance to give up a fifth of the country, and Putin is going to continue to threaten expansionism.
Some say if a deal didn't come soon, Ukraine funding from the U.S. would dry up soon.
I wouldn't give him another red cent. They've stole a lot of it. He even admitted he didn't know where some of it was.
I come from South Texas, and it's a hard sell to the American people to say we should be securing the border of other countries before we secure ours.
So what's next for Congress on Ukraine? Well, any further aid will not be considered until after a massive bill with President Trump's agenda gets through Congress, and that could be late summer. Tracy?
All right, Eric, thank you so much. I also know that you're also following the latest on the investigation involving that fatal midair collision between the American Airlines plane and that Black Hawk helicopter, which happened above the skies here in D.C. I know a preliminary report was released. What does it tell us?
Yeah, it certainly was. The National Transportation Safety Board released its preliminary findings on last month's crash. Now, one of the main findings, the FAA has now imposed permanent restrictions on non-essential helicopter operations around Washington National Airport. Now, and is also eliminating all helicopter and passenger jet mixed traffic. Now, this is closing a very key path known as Route 4. It's a major step in keeping everyone safe, according to the report. And then next Thursday, the NTSB and FAA officials will also lead the investigation, who led the investigation, that is, will be testifying before Congress on a hearing about the fatal crash, and we'll bring you the very latest from that hearing next week. Tracy?
Okay, Eric Rosales on Capitol Hill. Thank you so much. All right, now to the Middle East, where a surprise bombardment of Israeli airstrikes has plunged Gaza back into a nightmare. The Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry says more than 400 people were killed in the strikes, with hundreds more wounded. Hamas warned that Israel is breaching the ceasefire agreement and jeopardizing the fate of the remaining Israeli hostages. Israel says the move has been made in coordination with the White House and is placing the blame squarely on Hamas.
Hamas has rejected two concrete mediation proposals presented by the U.S. presidential envoy, Mr. Steve Witkoff, and other mediators. Israel agreed to these mediation proposals. Hamas has rejected all of the proposals. All of the proposals.
And joining us now with more is Ambassador James Jeffrey, a former ambassador to Turkey and Iraq. He is also the chair of the Middle East program at the Wilson Center. Mr. Ambassador, great to be with you today. Israel is threatening to ramp up these strikes against Hamas unless they resume what they call genuine talks, which involves freeing the remaining hostages. What more can you tell us?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. These talks are usually, because it's the most dramatic thing and it's a very important thing, framed about the hostage releases. And the Israelis have to, of course, let many more people out of terrorists out of jail in return. But the main thing that's holding up a final end to the fighting is the day after what happens to Gaza. Hamas and Israel, ever since the major peace proposal was laid out in May, and President Biden went to the press on it on the 31st of May, required the two sides to agree on essentially a Gaza after the fighting. From Israeli eyes, understandably, that means a Gaza without Hamas playing any military or governance role. Hamas is not interested in this, and therefore, the fighting is going to have to go on because you have to resolve this underlying thing. For the Israeli government, and he's been criticized for this, Bibi Netanyahu, ending Hamas's threat to Israel is more important than getting the remaining hostages back. It's simply a reality.
Yeah, tell us more, sir, about who was targeted, what was targeted exactly in these strikes as well.
Well, they are targeting both Hamas leaders weapons, possible storage sites, possible headquarters, and some infrastructure that Hamas is using. Tragically, and we've seen this, of course, ever since October of 2023, you launch attacks, no matter how hard you try to avoid it, in a highly built-up area, highly congested area like Gaza. There are going to be civilian casualties, and we're seeing that now.
Where do we go from here? What do you think comes next in all of this?
Well, we have seen this in our fighting against the Islamic State, Daesh, from 2014 on. They've been stripped of all their territory, but they're still roaming around desert areas of Iraq and Syria. Terrorist movements do not easily give up. We're facing this now in our U.S. strikes, of course, against the Houthis in Yemen that President Trump ordered 3 days ago. These strikes may limit the ability of these forces to attack either us, the international shipping, or in the case of Gaza, Israel. But it's very hard to compel these people to essentially surrender or to stop posing the threat to the international community that they currently do.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for your time today and for your insights. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Back here in the United States, Maryland is set to become the first state in the country to use money collected under the Affordable Care Act to pay for abortions. This is thanks to changes from insurance. The old line state has around $25 million, and lawmakers advanced two measures to put the money toward abortion, saying that most people believe it is health care. A major pro-abortion group is suggesting that U.S. states should stop reporting their abortion data. The Guttmacher Institute recently said that self-reporting the number of abortions in each state can be, quote, vital in shaping public policies to improve reproductive health access and outcomes. But the group also says that mandatory data collection should be used to, quote, harass or prosecute abortion facilities or women who obtain abortions, and now pro-lifers are responding. Writing in the National Review Online, Michael New says that it is highly unlikely that abortion data would be used to criminally target anyone. He also says that since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, accurate abortion data is even more important. And the author of that piece joins us now. Michael New is an assistant professor of social research at the Catholic University of America, and he is also a senior associate scholar at the pro-life Charlotte Lozier Institute. Michael, great to have you back on the show. First, I know you say that since the overturning of Roe versus Wade, accurate reporting on abortion data is more important now than ever. Tell us why.
Yeah, sure. That a lot of states have taken the lead and passed good, strong, protective pro-life laws, and those laws have done a lot of good. But in some cases, women circumvent those laws. They obtain abortions in other states where the laws are more permissive. They obtain chemical abortion pills through the mail. So really tracking accurate abortion data is a lot harder, but also a lot more important in a post-Dobbs world.
Yeah, I know you also mentioned the official abortion data from the Centers for Disease Control is really not very good. Let's talk more about that and why those numbers aren't really helpful. And do you think maybe they might improve those numbers and this reporting out of the Trump administration?
Sure. There's a lot of problems with the official data reported by the CDC. First off, it's not timely. The most recent data we have from the CDC is from 2022. That's a problem. Secondly, a lot of states don't report abortion data to the CDC. California has not reported any data since 1997. Other states like Maryland and New Hampshire also frequently don't report data, so it's incomplete. Even those states that do report data, they often don't give a helpful breakdown. They don't provide information about the age of the women who obtain abortions, the gestational age of the children who are aborted. So it's kind of weak data. With the Trump administration, we can hope the CDC will tighten this up and strengthen reporting standards. Frankly, past Republican administrations haven't really been able to do that, but there are some good pro-life people, in the Trump administration, and we can hope for better, more accurate data from the CDC.
Yeah, Michael, are you surprised at all about the Guttmacher Institute and asking states not to report abortion data?
Not really. I think pro-abortion groups have always prioritized permissive abortion policy over good public health. And accurate data on abortion, I think, would serve everybody well. It'll give us good information about things like the impact of contraception programs, sex education programs, various pro-life policies. I think it's just sad that they're prioritizing just permissive abortion policies over good public policy and good public health.
Yeah, and Michael, really quickly before I wrap up, I'm wondering, why is it that some states aren't reporting this information and others are?
That's a good question. I mean, the states that aren't reporting tend to be states like California, Maryland. These are states with very strong pro-abortion sentiment. Why they're not complying with, the CDC rules is puzzling. But again, I just think they oppose any kind of oversight, even minimal oversight. They want the most permissive abortion regime possible, and that's kind of what they have.
Yeah, and hopefully things will change under this new administration when it comes to those numbers. Michael, thank you so much, and thank you for what you do. We appreciate it. God bless.
Thank you.
I have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly, including Fight for the Faithful, what President Donald Trump says about the recent attack on a Catholic church, and we honor a solemn anniversary, the death of Terri Schiavo. Welcome back. A federal judge rules that the dismantling of USAID likely violated the Constitution. The judge has ordered the Trump administration to restore email and computer access to all employees of USAID, including those placed on administrative leave. The effort to gut the agency was part of the Trump administration's efforts to reduce the size of the federal government. The judge also blocked DOJ from further cuts to the agency. President Donald Trump responds to EWTN's question about a Catholic church in Wichita, Kansas that was vandalized. The crime happened over the weekend while Trump was touring the Kennedy Center. Yesterday, White House correspondent Owen Jensen asked him about the case.
Sir, a Catholic church in Wichita, Kansas over the weekend was vandalized, statues destroyed, glass smashed, graffiti all over the place. Church officials in Kansas called it a hate crime. I know you signed an EO eradicating anti-Christian bias, but sir, what more can the White House do to protect places of worship like St. Patrick's Church in Wichita, Kansas?
Well, we're going to take a look. I love Wichita. I got big votes there. We won that state by a lot. We'll take a look at that. When did this happen?
This happened over the weekend, sir. Again, statues destroyed, glass smashed, graffiti.
Yeah, I think it's a terrible thing. And this was a Catholic church.
Yes, St. Patrick's Catholic Church.
I'm going to take a look at it.
All right, here are the pictures right here from the Kansas Catholic Conference show the damage was done. The Wichita Police Department says that hate speech was graffitied on the walls and an American flag was burned. Police have arrested a suspect. It's terrible. Today marks a solemn anniversary. On March 18th, 2005, 20 years ago, the feeding tube was removed from Terri Schiavo. Terri's story gained national attention. A judge ruled that the feeding tube could be removed at her husband's request, even though her family asked for it to remain. She would die of starvation and dehydration nearly 2 weeks later. Her story would also inspire her brother Bobby Schindler to fight for families facing the same situation. And Bobby joins us now. He is also the president of the Terri Schiavo Life and Hope Network. Bobby, thank you so much for joining us and coming on the show today on such a solemn anniversary for you and your family. Tell us what this day means for you all, and also how your Catholic faith, Bobby, has helped you and your family during this time.
Well, it certainly brings back a flood of memories. Each year, it doesn't get any easier thinking about those events, particularly the next 2 weeks, and having to witness my sister die such a terribly unjust and inhumane death. And the fact, and the reason we're doing the work we're doing today, but the fact that Terri's case was not isolated, and it's happening every single day across countless hospitals and nursing homes and hospices is just troubling, obviously, and there's just not much that seems to be being done to stop it or prevent it from happening.
Yeah, and you mentioned, and we mentioned, the feeding tube was removed from your sister. And I think a lot of people forget that she didn't die instantaneously. Talk to us more about that and just how barbaric it was.
Well, no, I mean, it was the only thing sustaining my sister. That's often, we read in the media, there's so much misinformation that's still out there about my sister, her case and condition. But one was the only thing keeping her alive was the same thing that keeps us all alive, which is food and hydration. Terri had difficulty swallowing because of a brain injury and therefore needed a feeding tube in order to receive her food and hydration. But it was removed on, as you mentioned, March 18th, and it took almost 2 weeks. It's something if we do to an animal, it would be criminal. We would go to jail if we did this to an animal, but yet it happens every single day, and that's why we're doing the work that we're doing, is trying to help other families that are confronted with similar types of situations.
Yeah, and Bobby, talk to us more about that, about your organization and the work that you're doing to advocate for those who are in similar situations as your sister.
Yeah, well, we only get the hard cases. We don't hear all the wonderful stories that exist in healthcare today, and it is a complex system. But nonetheless, it seems to me these past 20 years, decisions are being made awfully quick, particularly when someone experiences a brain injury, to stop treatment, sometimes days, sometimes even hours. Pressure is being put on families to terminate treatment. And we believe, in fact, all the research out there, the research on the brain, it really flies in the face of what should be proper treatment for people that do sustain these brain injuries. They need time. In fact, it's being reported that up to a month before any type of life or decision are made when it comes to brain injuries. So we certainly will stand with families that call us when these decisions are being made so quickly, and use our resources, doing anything we can to help the family get the time they want and the treatment they want for their loved ones.
Well, Bobby, thank you so much for joining us and for all the important work you do. God bless you.
Thank you very much.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, a plea for peace, the Pope's latest message about the absurdity of war and how to foster peace. Plus, new details from the Vatican on how the Synod on Synodality will be implemented across the Church. Although he remains in the hospital, the Holy Father is still working and pushing for peace. In a letter sent to the editor-in-chief of an Italian newspaper, the Holy Father reflected on the fragility of life and the brutality of war. He said in part, quote, "Human fragility has the power to make us more lucid about what endures and what passes and what brings life and what kills." Speaking of the power of words, the Holy Father continues, "We must disarm words to disarm minds and disarm the earth. There is a great need for reflection, calmness, and an awareness of complexity." Meanwhile, the Vatican announced a special ecclesial assembly to evaluate how Catholic communities around the world have implemented the recent Synod's recommendations. Catholic News Agency's journalist Christina Millar has more.
Good evening, Tracy. Pope Francis has approved a 3-year implementation phase for the Synod on Synodality, which will culminate in a special ecclesial assembly that will take place in the Vatican in October 2028. Cardinal Mario Grech, the Secretary General of the Synod's General Secretariat, announced the convocation in a letter addressed to bishops worldwide. Pope Francis gave his approval this month while continuing medical treatment at Rome's Gemelli Hospital. This means that over the next 3 years, the Vatican will accompany churches worldwide to implement the final document of last year's Synodal Assembly. The goal remains to make exchanges and dialogue between churches and within the Church concrete. In an interview with EWTN some months ago, the Secretary General of the Synod, Cardinal Mario Grech, hinted that an additional Vatican Assembly is necessary to reflect on the paths and fruits of synodality in local churches.
Can we say that it is concluded? Not really, because now when the Holy Father has restituted, given back this document to the local churches, he is inviting them to proceed with their prayer, with their discernment, with their reflection, to translate the vision of this document in the life of the local church. So we need also a moment to meet again and make an evaluation and share the gifts that the Holy Spirit is giving to the local churches for the benefit of the whole church.
In his letter, Cardinal Grech emphasized that it would not be a new synod and that the focus will be on consolidating the path taken so far. The letter also states that evaluation assemblies will take place at a diocesan, national, and international level throughout 2027. Just as during the Synod, both bishops and lay people will gather to reflect on the synodal journey and discern future steps. The mission of evangelization is now in the hands of the people of God present in the local churches. Continental meetings will also take place throughout 2028, followed by the final Global Assembly set to take place in the Vatican in October of the same year. In Rome, Christine Migliare, EWTN News Nightly.
And we thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, X, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sabol. Good night, and God bless.